We believe, and it's documented, there are underdeveloped leaders at all levels in an organization, whether that's executive, management, supervisor, or even individual contributor. What happens then is that creates what we call organizational confusion. And that results in disengaged, underdeveloped, and unfulfilled employees, which directly impacts our performance, our productivity, and our profitability. So we just don't have leaders deep enough in our organizations to really attack those issues. So you can see how that would impact the financial success of an organization.
Welcome to the Great Talent, Great Business podcast, your go-to resource for building exceptional teams and thriving businesses. Each episode delivers actionable insights on harnessing offshore talent, integrating innovative technology, cultivating a vibrant company culture, and attracting and retaining top performers to drive sustainable growth. Subscribe now to never miss an episode. For more resources, visit greattalentpodcast.com, where you can download this episode's free worksheet designed to help you apply today's insight to your business. And now, here's your host, Rob Levin.
Today, I'm joined by Bob Borcherdt, a visionary leader, strategist, and business owner with over 35 years of experience. As the founder and CEO of Into Great, he empowers businesses to grow by building better leaders and creating cultures of clarity that drive employee engagement and fulfillment. Bob is the co-author of the book Leading to the One and the creator of the clarity-based leadership system with a focus on transforming leadership to achieve greater organizational success. Bob, thanks so much for hopping on the show, and it's great to have you on the podcast. Let's dive right in.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Really appreciate you having me here and looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. Bob, let's start here. In your book, Leading to the One, you talk about this interesting concept of the unused human capacity that exists in every organization. Can you tell us a little bit in terms of what you mean by that and where it exists in an organization and what that actually means to businesses?
Yeah, great question. Here's what we have found in the years that we started the business in 2011. And as we've worked with leaders and senior leaders, anytime we're in a conversation with a prospective client, the question we will always ask them is, do you have any line item in any of your financial statements that measures unused human capacity? And 100% of the time they will say no, because there isn't a line item for that, right?
Bob, I'm just going to cut in. I was trained as an accountant, and I will tell you that they never mention this either in school or when I was at a big six firm. So tell us more.
You won't find it in GAAP, right? It's not a generally accepted accounting principle. But the interesting thing, Rob, is the follow-up question then, do you have unused human capacity in your organization? 100% of the time they say yes. Intuitively, we just know it's there. We have a hard time putting our finger on it and measuring it, but we even have a harder time figuring out how to access it. And so that's the work we do. And I think one of the things that I've noticed in our industry, in the leadership development industry, I think we have a really bad habit of treating symptoms and not root causes. And the reason is because symptoms are a lot more profitable. It's like most industries in general, right? It's just more profitable to treat the symptoms than to really help people get below the surface to the root cause. And so it's the easy route. And so we kind of see the root cause of this issue in four areas. We believe, and it's documented, there are underdeveloped leaders at all levels in an organization, whether that's executive, management, supervisor, or even individual contributor. What happens then is that creates what we call organizational confusion. And that results in disengaged, underdeveloped, and unfulfilled employees, which directly impacts our performance, our productivity, and our profitability. And let me just give you three statistics. With underdeveloped leaders, research done by Gallup on 3.3 million employees at 180,000 business units found that poor leadership leads to 20% lower productivity, 23% lower profitability, 50% higher turnover. So when we talk about the turnover problem, what's really the root cause of a lot of that? 63% more safety incidents, and the performance of a team is 70% correlated to the effectiveness of the leader. So we just don't have leaders deep enough in our organizations to really attack those issues. So you can see how that would impact the financial success of an organization. In the area of organizational confusion, just one item alone, communication. In research published by SHRM, in larger corporations, it's $12,500 per employee in the area of poor communication at a salary of $67,000. So that's 18% of a person's salary. We're going to be impacted in our organization by that amount in larger organizations just by poor communication. So think of the confusion and the noise, running in the systems, right? Smaller companies, 100 employees and less, it's $4,200 per employee. Just at that level, just one thing in the organizational confusion. And then we're all familiar with Gallup's information on disengaged employees. It's probably costing us 1.9 trillion right now in lost productivity. What 34 million full-time workers right now, that's like $14,000 per employee. So you can make a case pretty quickly that there's significant financial impact. And those are areas where we see unused human capacity. And so we believe, and this is the process we take our clients through, let's build better leaders at all levels. Let's create cultures of clarity. That will result in engaged and developed employees. And we do that in effective one-on-one interactions, not one-on-ones, but effective one-on-ones. And that will have a positive impact on performance, productivity, and profitability.
Gotcha. I want to dive deeper into a couple of things that you said. So first of all, our audience is mostly small and mid-sized businesses. So let's try to focus in terms of following up on some of this with those types of companies. So when it comes to the unused human capacity that exists in every organization, you're primarily focusing on leadership and, I guess, as a subset of that, communication. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, I would say it's our focus is going to be on creating what we call these cultures or environments of clarity in these organizations. And so, Rob, it's really interesting. The impact is the same at a small company versus a big company. It's just that a smaller company, we're probably talking about an owner and the owner's leadership team versus in a bigger size company, you've got multiple teams.
Sure.
And so we actually have defined culture a little bit differently. We talk about it in terms of micro cultures. So if I have a small business of about 25 employees, I might have a culture. If I'm in a business of 1,000 employees, there's many cultures because cultures are led by leaders or business owners. But the principles still apply and the financial impact is still the same.
Okay. So Bob, can you give us some examples of what this might look like? So you explained the financial impact, which is significant, but give us, just so people can touch and feel this a little bit, what are some examples of what this might look like so we can most likely get a few people's heads nodding going, oh, okay, now, yeah, I see this in my company.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the areas is this issue of disengagement. So we know, and we can kind of see it and feel it in our people, and we read stuff about it. We're certainly seeing the turnover. So we're having a hard time getting people to stick for some reason. Now, there's a whole other side of that equation that involves the person. So it's not always the leaders or the organization's fault. But and then we kind of see in organizations this sense of people feeling like they're just not winning. Like, I'm confused. I don't really know what's expected of me. And I think people wake up every day and go to work and want to win. And when we have this sense that they're not winning, I think we have to start asking some questions as to why are we not putting them in a position to win?
Yeah, I think of it as, look, I've talked about this. It's all over LinkedIn in terms of posts, talking about the Gallup polls and a lot more. There's clearly some generational differences, right, in the workplace.
Yep.
We have a previous podcast with John Shepard where we talk about this. But I still think that as the business owner, and especially in a smaller business where every single seat counts, you have to make sure you're doing your part to make sure you're setting the stage for an environment where it's very clear on what people need to do and where we're going and the tools and all of that stuff. Now, you mentioned this term, cultures of clarity. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, so one of our premises is we believe that the leader is really the person that kind of sets the tone. And just like you mentioned, that business owner that kind of creates that microculture or that culture in their organization, we really set the tone for that. So we created what we call the clarity model. And what we mean by that is there's 3 things that we can focus on to drive clarity in our organizations or drive out confusion. One is higher levels of awareness. And that's awareness of ourselves, others, and the situations we find ourselves in. And that's well documented in the leadership space, high levels of self-awareness. Secondly, we believe expectations are important. So awareness and expectations. The greatest source of frustration is an unmet expectation. Well, what if I, as the business owner, don't do a really good job communicating those expectations? Or what if I have them and it's not really a fair expectation for that employee? What if I have that employee in the wrong seat, right? And I don't really even position them as a place to win. And so if you look at what we call my behavioral design, I'm going to thrive in certain environments and I'm not going to thrive in other environments. But if I don't know that as a leader, how do I create this space where this person can actually win? So then I end up expecting things of Rob that are totally unrealistic. And that leads to deep levels of personal frustration. And then thirdly, the third part of the model is feedback. So awareness, expectations, and feedback. We just think people have a right to know where they stand. And by the way, all of that is bi-directional. Because if I report to you, Rob, I have expectations of you as my leader. Do I have an opportunity to communicate those? Do I have the opportunity to give you feedback? So it's not a one-way thing. And we just see a lot of that missing. We don't see it being very bi-directional. We don't see expectations really being very clear and realistic and fair, putting the person in a position to win. And then I think feedback's tough. And so we use behavioral data to help us understand, how does this person like to receive feedback? How are you going to give feedback? Are these fair expectations of this person?
Right.
So the clarity part of this is built around what we call the clarity model.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And by the way, of course, as soon as you say it, it seems like common sense, but this is a challenging thing for people, for owners to do, because it's not, to me, I think about it in different levels, and it's probably a little different about how you might be thinking about this. First of all, is it clear on what we're trying to accomplish this week, this year even, right? Or
Right.
even in our the long-term future of the company? Is it clear what we're trying to accomplish? I know at my company, it's how many certified professionals. Like we have this one number that we get the whole company related on, but you can't stop there. You have to go into each department. And of course, it's not necessarily the owner, but the department heads have to go into each department and make sure it's clear that
Right.
we know what the department's role in this is, and then each person in the department, what their role is for the greater good of whether it's one number that you're tracking or whatever other things you're tracking in the company. And I have found that we run on EOS, on the entrepreneurial operating system. That certainly helps, but you still have to connect all the dots, and it's a lot of work. But the impact, and I guess you're alluding to this, the impact is huge.
Well, it is, and love EOS and love concepts like that. And I think what we find with our clients is oftentimes coming up with the things we need to work on and the strategies and the rocks and all that stuff. There's processes for that. The big disconnect seems to be, do I actually have the people to execute that? Do I actually have them in the right roles to execute that? And how would I even know that? And so that's a space we spend a lot of time working with our clients.
Well, it sounds like you're teeing me up for the next question here, which is, how do you go about doing that? Are you starting with the leaders themselves and them knowing themselves and their strengths and their unique abilities? How do you go about,
Yeah, and I love the word you just used, unique abilities. I think one of the things that we've missed in the leadership space is, for some reason, we think leadership is about leading to the group or the masses. And that's why we titled the book Leading to the One. And it comes from a concept I mentioned to you earlier. I have 4 children. I have 4 boys. And for me, being a dad wasn't hard. It was super hard, was being 4 different dads to 4 very different sons. And I had the opportunity to play college basketball, and I played in the early 80s, and I played for a coach that was old school at that time, and he coached all 13 of us exactly the same way. Well, we weren't all the same types of players. So leading to the one is, as a leader, I got to get to know Rob at a much deeper level if I'm going to lead him effectively. Because if I have Sarah over here on the team as well, I may not be able to lead Sarah the exact same way that I lead Rob, because they're totally different individuals. And so the way we interact with each other is going to be very, very different.
This episode is brought to you by Work Better Now, your trusted partner for getting high-performing talent from Latin America. Our clients tell us that partnering with Work Better Now has transformed their businesses by providing the proactive, reliable, and skilled professionals that they need to thrive. Ready to build your dream team? Visit workbetternow.com to schedule your consultation today. As a special thank you to listeners of the Great Talent, Great Business podcast, we're offering $150 off your first 3 months. Just mention Great Talent during your consult. Join the businesses building their dream teams and take the next step in transforming yours today. I know that your company, Integrate, uses an assessment called the Predictive Index. Talk to us a little bit about how that works and what's the relationship between that and the unused human capacity.
Great question. Yeah, we do use Predictive Index. It's a behavioral analytics tool. It's a lot more than that because it's actually software that the client subscribes to. And so we're half software company. There's 700 behavioral assessments on the market, so you can kind of pick whichever one you want. Yeah. But the importance of the data is what's critical. And so what we have found is when we're talking about development of leaders and people and organizations and going after that unused human capacity, we have a really bad habit of trying to develop people into us or into what we need them to be, not what they're designed to be. Well, we can't develop them into who they're designed to be unless we know their design. And that's where the behavioral analytics just becomes critically important to us. It shows us, here's who this person is. Here's the type of leader. There's 9 leadership styles. Here's the type of leader they are. Now I can put them in an environment to succeed. Because if Rob and Bob are very different leaders, it's not going to be the same. And we tend to just treat things very kind of globally and not individually like that. And so we believe that if we're going to be in this space, the data is critical. We say we're development experts who are data-centric, insight-driven, and action-oriented. That's who Integrate is. Data is going to be at the center of everything.
So help me connect, and let's help the audience connect the dots here. You use this assessment to get a good understanding of the leader, characteristics, strengths, weaknesses, unique abilities. How does that then translate into the whole communication? Create that bridge for us. How does that reach over to the communication side of leading to make sure that there's not unused human capacity and we're operating efficiently and there's clarity on what I need to be doing as somebody who works in one of these departments?
Exactly. Well, interesting thing. What the data reveals to us is someone's communication style, someone's communication behavior, some of their work styles, like how do they make decisions, how do they take action, kind of their overall work style. So the data has to be translated into meaningful things in the workplace to understand how does this person actually work. And in the area of communication, we know there's actually 4 primary languages that people speak in: visionary, connected, methodical, and analytical. And if I'm a visionary communicator and I have someone on my team who's methodical and I'm in visionary mode all the time and I don't ever land the plane to say we need to do 1, 2, and 3, we're going right by people all the time, right? And it doesn't matter which of those 4 quadrants you're in, that's what we end up doing. So if we can't learn to communicate in all 4, which is the best way to do it, or if we don't really know how this person on my team likes to receive information, if I'm speaking English and they only understand German, I got a real problem. And that's kind of how it ends up being confusing on the communication stage. And then the other part of that is just the communication of our expectation. I just think we don't, as a society, we just don't do a really good job. I'm the worst at it. Like all my expectations are in my head.
I'll compete with you for that title.
You want to arm wrestle? Yeah, like they're all right there. I may not have told you, but I'm going to hold you to it. Well, that's not fair. That's just, and it creates a lot of confusion and not good communication.
Yeah. I gave myself a title many, many years ago of being a drive-by delegator. And I also love the term. When I was in business school, I had this professor who's a very well-known entrepreneur guy named Peter Guber. And he mentioned this term. This was close to 30 years ago. That still sticks with me, which is mutual mystification. We both walk away from a meeting without having a slight clue of what we're supposed to do.
Exactly. Well, and in our system of implementation, that's one of the things. So we don't develop leaders for people. We teach them the system to use so they can develop them. Right. And one of the things we teach them is at the end of every conversation or meeting, go, are we leaving this more or less clear? Because if we're leaving this less clear, then we got to stop and go, where did we create more confusion in this? Because some of us, like you and I, have a habit. I actually think people ought to be able to just figure it out.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And that's really unfair.
Bob, let's kind of jump to a topic that we briefly touched upon, which is you've been doing this for a little while. What are the changes that you've noticed in terms of workplace culture the different generations in the workplace, the Gen Z, we've all read about Gen Z and millennials, and that let's just say that they work differently than us. What are your observations, and what should companies be doing about this, about dealing with the fact that the younger generations work, again, saying it this way, work quite differently than our generations?
Yeah. And I would even add to it and say, in many ways, better. Like oftentimes the conversation is, oh, it's just worse because, X, Y, and Z, right? And by the way, that's been every generation where it's been that way. Every generational transition kind of ends up that way. I heard an economist speak once, and he said, you have to be careful with those stereotypes because usually only about 40% of the group has those stereotypes. The other 40, there's another 40% that doesn't, and 20 are trying to figure it out. And so it typically isn't even a whole age group. But I think that's why leading to the one is so critically important. Because whether I'm leading somebody that's 60 or somebody that's 20, if I don't know that person and how they work best and what really motivates them and where they're going to thrive, I'm probably going to work with the 20-year-old differently than I am the 60-year-old. Right? So leading to the one becomes critical. I can't lead to generational groupings.
Yeah.
I have to lead to the individual that's on my team.
That's a great point. Bob, thank you so much for sharing these awesome insights. I've really enjoyed this discussion. I think you bring a very unique perspective to this, particularly by using data in this process, among other things. And my mind is now racing with how we can be implementing this over here at Work Better Now, because it just makes so much sense. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to speak with us.
Yeah, and Rob, if I could leave the audience with just one more thing, kind of a word of encouragement, this stuff can be learned. You mentioned earlier, it's kind of common sense. And we see that a lot. It's just not common practice. Right. The secret is, how do you take something that's common sense and turn it into common practice? And so here's what I would encourage small business owners, leaders in small organizations or large organizations. It really doesn't matter. I think the first step is take responsibility for the fact that you as the leader are responsible for the development of your people. It's not HR's job. It's not a consultant's job. It's not a coach's job. It's not sending them to a seminar. It's not any of that. We have to rethink the way we develop people. We believe that happens in the one-on-one. We believe it happens in the flow of work in bite-sized pieces. It has to be development by design in terms of who they are. But we as leaders can learn to do this. It's not as hard as it seems. It's not as daunting as it seems. But I think when I look at the workplace evolution that's taken place, we have to get this. We can't lead like we did 30 years ago. We can't even lead like we did 5 years ago. And so we just believe the leader has to step back into that role from the CEO on down and take responsibility for the development of his or her team. And that will cascade in the bigger organizations as they do that.
Yeah. Thanks for closing with that. That's really powerful. As I was closing up, I was thinking, what is the first step somebody can take? And to that end, Bob, where can people find out more about you and your company, Integrate?
Yeah, so first thing you can do is go to www.integrate.com, and that's IN, the number 2, and then the word great, GREAT.com. If you're interested in the book, it's called Leading to the One, Creating Cultures of Clarity, where people are engaged, developed, and fulfilled. I co-authored it with the president of Integrate, Nikki McLeod, who now runs the business. And there are resources that you can tap into from the book as well and from the website if you have any interest in getting in touch with us and learning what this looks like. But remember, our work is to come in and teach you a system so that it's ongoing after we're gone. Our job is not to develop your people.
Yeah. And I'll just close with this final remark, which in my experience, doing things like this, like everything that we've talked about, really getting at this whole concept of leading to the one, can make a significant difference.
Yes.
Not only in the financial results of the company, but it just becomes a lot more fun for the owner and everybody else in the company.
That's right. And we tell clients that right up front. This isn't just about making more money, because the way you solve the employee disengagement problem is you make sure that they're fulfilled, because fulfilled employees are not disengaged. So ultimately, we want these people to win, because if they don't win, none of us win.
Yeah. Bob, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for listening. The Great Talent, Great Business podcast is brought to you by Work Better Now. Don't forget to review, subscribe, and download the worksheet for this episode at the link below. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on LinkedIn at Great Talent, Great Business, or visit greattalentpodcast.com.